I've been reborn. Back to the exact day, Lu Ruyan and I were supposed to get our marriage certificate. In my past life, I was the ultimate rebound guy. The only reason I managed to marry Lu Ruyan was simply because she wanted a safe simp to settle down with. But after we got married, I ended up with a cold, distant wife, and a lifeless marriage that dragged on for 10 years. So this time, I purposely showed up an hour late, and in that single hour, I watched with my own eyes as Lu Ruyan got a call from her ex and left in a total panic. She didn't reject his call like she did in my past life, and she definitely didn't wait for me. Standing outside the civil registry, looking at the time on my phone, a knowing smirk crept onto my face. When I opened my eyes, the sky outside wasn't completely bright yet. I stared blankly at the ceiling for a few seconds. There was a water stain up there. I was way too familiar with that stain. Back when I was young and renting, it was the first thing I saw when I woke up. Liu Ruyan even mentioned it to me a few times, saying it looked like a crouching cat. Wait, I bolted upright. This was the apartment I rented before we got married. I gave it up after the wedding. Later, we moved into that 3-bedroom place. We decorated the marital home in the rustic style she liked, hung up the decorative paintings she brought back from Northern Europe, and the ceiling definitely didn't have a water stain. I grabbed the phone by my bed and lit up the screen. March 15, 2024, 7:03 a.m. March 15th, my fingers froze. The glare from the screen hit my face, a little blinding. I remembered this date way too clearly. For 10 whole years, on this exact day, every year, I'd instinctively double-check the calendar, like some kind of unbreakable muscle memory. March 15th, 2024, the day Lu Ruyan and I got our marriage certificate. We agreed to meet at the registry entrance at 9 a.m. That day, I showed up at 8:40. I stood at the entrance for 20 minutes, watching couples going in and out. Some were smiling, some were crying, and some were completely expressionless, like they were just running an errand. Liu Ruyan arrived at exactly 9 a.m., wearing a beige trench coat. Her hair was styled a bit nicer than usual, and her lipstick was a shade redder. When she saw me, she just nodded and said, "Let's go in." No romance, no extra words. We lined up, filled out forms, took our photo, and said our vows. The whole process was as polite and formal as a business transaction. When we took the photo, the photographer told us to get a bit closer. Liu Ruyan shuffled half a step toward me. I could smell her perfume. It was the one we picked out at the mall. A week before the wedding, the salesgirl called it a man-killer scent. She tested it out, asked me if it smelled good, and I said yes. So, she bought it. Over the years she went through 3 bottles of it, 1 bottle a year. The wedding, buying a house, going home for the holidays, dealing with relatives, having a kid. Everything went exactly by the book, like a perfectly planned assembly line. Liu Ruyan was a good wife, filial, proper, and always sensible. She kept the house in perfect order and never embarrassed me in front of others. My parents liked her, my friends envied me, and even I couldn't pinpoint a single flaw. It's just that there was always something between us. Something thin and transparent, like cling film wrapping up our marriage, keeping it fresh, but also suffocating it. We shared a bed, sleeping back to back, scrolling on our phones on weekends. Our conversations only ever revolved around the kid, the bills, and our parents' medical checkups. Whenever she went on a business trip, I actually felt a sense of relief. 10 years, thousands of good nights, but never once an "I love you." I put my phone down, got out of bed, and stepped barefoot onto the floor. The March morning was a bit chilly. I walked to the window and pulled open the curtains. The street view outside was both familiar and totally alien. The breakfast stall downstairs was already set up. A few people were lined up next to the steaming baskets. The lady selling pancakes was cracking an egg onto the grill. I used to live here. I moved out in 2019. Later on, this building was demolished. I even passed by last year and only saw construction fences and cranes. So I really came back. I stood there, watching the sunlight slowly creep in through the window, dyeing the wall of the opposite building a pale gold. I tried to remember exactly how I ended up back here, but my mind was just a blurry mess. What the hell did I do last night? I think I drank a lot. I think Whatever, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it's 7:05 a.m. on March 15th, 2024. Less than 2 hours until my 9 a.m. meetup with Liu Ruyan. I could go, or I could just not. I stood frozen, thinking about it for a long time. Long enough that the soles of my feet got cold. Long enough that the line for pancakes downstairs had cycled through 2 totally different groups of people. Then I turned around and went to the bathroom to wash up. While shaving, I looked at the guy in the mirror. He's 10 years younger. No dark circles. No exhausted, weathered look. My hair was still pitch black. I thought of my face 10 years from now. Tired, numb, occasionally staring into the mirror thinking, is this it for the rest of my life? After shaving, I got dressed. I skipped the plaid shirt Liu Ruyan bought for me. I picked out a black one, dug out from the back of the closet, tags still attached. I was probably around 30 when I bought it, thinking I'd wear it someday, but I totally forgot about it. Before heading out, I checked the time. 8:15 a.m. The registry wasn't far from my apartment. Just a 15-minute walk. If I left right now, I'd be there by 8:30. That would be 10 minutes earlier than my past life. I stood in the entryway, my hand on the doorknob, completely still. Someone was walking up the stairs outside. Heavy, rushed footsteps. They passed my door and faded away. The breakfast stall downstairs drifted up the smell of fried dough sticks and soy milk. The scent hit me, and my stomach quietly growled. 8:16 a.m. I decided to wait a bit. I didn't know what I was waiting for. I just wanted to wait. I walked back in and sat on the couch. It was an old fabric sofa the landlord provided. The cushions had completely caved in. As soon as you sat, you just sank right into it. I leaned back and stared at the clock on the wall. It had a cheap plastic frame, its second hand ticking away. It wasn't very accurate. It ran about 2 or 3 minutes slow every month. In my past life, I thought about replacing that clock a million times. But I never got around to it, because I figured I was moving out anyway. And when I actually did move out, I left the clock for the landlord. Wonder if it's still there now. 8:20 a.m. I pulled out my phone and swiped the screen a few times. No WeChat messages from Liu Ruyan. No missed calls either. We had one phone call last night. She double-checked the time and place. Her tone was completely, strictly business. 9 Ammon. Civil registry entrance. Don't forget your ID and household register. I said got it, and she hung up. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned for ages before finally passing out. At the time, I thought it was pre-wedding jitters. Only later did I realize it was probably my body trying to warn me. 8:25 a.m. I got up and walked to the window to look down. The streets were getting more crowded. Students in their uniforms. Office workers holding briefcases. Grandpas and grandmas coming back from the market. A young mom pushed a stroller past. The toddler inside was waving their hands, babbling about something. It made me think of our daughter. Her nickname was Tian Tian. When Tian Tian was 3, Liu Ruyan took her to early childhood classes. Twice a week, rain or shine. Sometimes if I got off work early, I'd go pick them up. Standing outside the classroom, watching Tian Tian play games with the teacher, her eyes curving into happy, little crescents. Tian Tian looked just like Liu Ruyan. Eyes, nose, mouth. She even frowned exactly like her. Except she loved to smile way more than Liu Ruyan ever did. When she smiled, her 2 little fangs would show, absolutely melting your heart. I loved Tian Tian, and Liu Ruyan loved Tian Tian too. Because of Tian Tian, we had countless interactions and conversations. But that invisible wall was always there. Sometimes, after I finished reading Tian Tian a bedtime story, I'd step out of her room and see Liu Ruyan leaning against the headboard, scrolling on her phone. The screen lighting up her face, her expression as dead and flat as a stagnant pool. I'd lie down on the other side of the bed, with my back to her, half a meter of space between us. But it felt like an entire river. I wanted to ask her so many times, why did you marry me in the first place? But I never could get the words out. Afraid that the answer would be something I couldn't handle. Or afraid it'd be some bullshit like we were a good match. What's worse than a completely loveless marriage is being treated as nothing but the safest backup plan. 8:30 a.m. My phone rang. I looked down. It was Liu Ruyan. My heart skipped a beat. I stared at her name on the screen, my finger hovering over the accept button. I froze for 2 seconds, but didn't press it. The ringtone kept playing, the vibrations gently buzzing in the palm of my hand. In my past life, every time Lu Ruyan called me, it was always like this. Answered instantly, keeping my tone flat. Yeah, okay, got it. We rarely stayed on the phone for long. The longest call we ever had was arguing about which kindergarten to send Tian Tian. It lasted 13 minutes. After I hung up, I held my phone and just zoned out for a bit. I realized those 13 minutes were strictly business. Not a single wasted word. The ringing stopped. The screen showed a missed call. Liu Ruyan. I stood there gripping my phone, listening to my own heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. Every beat was crystal clear. I didn't call back. 8:35 a.m. Zhao. I walked to the entryway, changed my shoes, and pushed the door open. The hallway was a bit dim. I made my way down the stairs, my footsteps echoing hollowly. When I reached the second floor, I bumped into an old lady carrying groceries up. I stepped aside to let her pass. She nodded at me, mumbling something under her breath. That deny. As I stepped out of the building, the sunlight hit me head-on, making me squint from the glare. I headed in the direction of the registry, but I took my sweet time. Passing by the breakfast stall, I stopped and ordered a bowl of soy milk and 2 fried dough sticks. I grabbed a seat at a small table out front. The soy milk was piping hot. I blew on it and took a sip. On the day of our wedding in my past life, I hadn't eaten a thing. So when it was time to take photos, the photographer kept telling me, "Groom, smile." I couldn't even force a smile. In the end, my expression in the photo looked worse than if I were crying. Liu Ruyan later shoved that photo into an album, burying it at the bottom of a box. It never saw the light of day again. One time, Tian Tian dug it out, pointed at me in the picture and asked, "Daddy, why were you so sad?" I froze for a second and told her, Daddy wasn't sad. I was just a little nervous. 8:40 a.m. I finished the last drop of my soy milk, paid, and kept walking. Past that street, around the corner, and 200 meters down was the registry. I had walked this route countless times in my past life. I could walk it with my eyes closed. But now, with every step I took, it felt incredibly surreal. Just as I was nearing the entrance, I stopped and hid behind a sycamore tree. From this angle, I had a clear view of the registry's main doors and the open space out front. Right now, there were a few people standing around. A young couple was adjusting each other's collars, the girl wearing a shy smile. There was also a guy in a suit looking down at his phone, probably waiting for someone. But no, Liu Ruyan. I leaned against the tree trunk and checked my phone. 8:50 a.m. I was 10 minutes later than in my past life, but still 10 minutes earlier than our agreed time. Liu Ruyan probably hadn't arrived yet. Just as I was thinking that, a taxi pulled up to the entrance. The back door opened. First came a foot in a high heel, beige. Then she stepped out completely, a beige trench coat, long hair draped over her shoulders, holding a document folder in her hand. Liu Ruyan, from dozens of meters away. I watched her, a weird feeling welling up inside me. She looked younger than I remembered, younger than the 10 years younger me I saw in the mirror every day. Even younger, a 25-year-old Liu Ruyan. Her face didn't yet have that faint trace of exhaustion she'd carry later on. She stood perfectly straight, chin tilted up slightly, like a proud swan. She glanced down at her watch, then looked around, probably looking for me. I saw her take out her phone, glance at the screen and put it back. 9:00 am sharp. Liu Ruyan's eyes scanned the crowd. When she couldn't find me, she frowned and took her phone out again. This time, she looked down and started typing. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. I looked down, a WeChat message from her. "I'm here. Where are you?" I stared at that text, my finger hovering over the screen, but I still didn't make a move. 9:01 a.m. Liu Ruyan stood at the door, gripping her phone as she looked around again. Her frown deepened. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I knew that expression all too well. She was annoyed. When Liu Ruyan gets mad, she doesn't throw a tantrum, nor does she complain. She just purses her lips tightly and bottles up all those emotions herself. I had seen that look way too many times in my past life. 9:03 a.m. Liu Ruyan looked down at her phone. This time, she wasn't typing. She was just staring at the screen, like she was hesitating. I stood behind the tree, watching her from dozens of meters away. Right then, I saw her expression change. It was a very bizarre shift. Her eyebrows twitched up slightly, her eyes widened a bit, and her lips parted. The expression only lasted for 2 seconds. Then she looked down at her phone and started typing furiously. After typing for a bit, she stopped, seemingly waiting for a reply. A few seconds later, her phone buzzed again. She looked down. This time, her expression completely flipped, her brows furrowed deeply, and her lips pressed together even tighter. But not because she was annoyed. It was a kind of anxiety I had never seen in her. The hand holding her phone was trembling slightly, while her other hand gripped the document folder tightly. She looked up and frantically scanned the area. This time, her gaze swept right over where I was standing. I instinctively shrank back, but her eyes didn't linger. They just swept right past me. Then, I saw it. Liu Ruyan did something I had never seen her do before. She held her phone to her ear and made a call. The call connected fast. She rapidly said something into the receiver. Her voice was kept very low, so I couldn't hear. But her face was perfectly clear to me. Desperate and panicked. That kind of expression. In 10 years of marriage, I had never once seen it on her face. She hung up and just stood there, staring blankly at the folder in her hand, totally motionless. For a solid 10 seconds or more, she stood there like a statue. Then she lifted her head and scanned the area once more. This time, her gaze was slower, like she was carefully searching for something. I hid my entire body behind the tree trunk, only peeking out with one eye. She didn't spot me. Liu Ruyan looked down at her phone, probably checking the time again, 9:07 a.m. Then she made a decision. She turned and walked to the curb, waving down a taxi. The door opened. She got in, and the car started. It merged into traffic, getting further and further away, until it disappeared at the end of the street. I stepped out from behind the tree. I just stood there, staring in the direction the taxi vanished. 9:08 a.m. The wind blew past my ears, carrying the chill of March. The sunlight hitting my body was warm. A record store across the street was blasting an old song, Sunny Day, by Jay Chu. The piano intro drifted over in broken fragments. I looked down at my phone. No new messages. No missed calls. Liu Ruyan didn't tell me she was leaving, nor did she explain why. She just ghosted, like a stone tossed into a lake, causing a quick ripple, and then the water returning to total stillness, as if nothing had happened at all. I pocketed my phone, standing there and taking a deep breath. The air smelled like sycamore leaves, mixed with car exhaust, and the scent of fried dough from the breakfast stall. All these smells rushed into my nose at once, leaving me a bit dazed. I remembered this exact day in my past life. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, Liu Ruyan showed up on time. We went in together, lined up, filled out forms, took our picture, and said our vows. I remembered when we took the photo, she stood next to me, her shoulder gently brushing against my arm, passing a bit of warmth through our clothes. During our vows, her voice wasn't loud, but she enunciated every single word clearly. We willingly enter into matrimony. From today onward, we will jointly shoulder the responsibilities and duties bestowed by marriage. After she finished reciting, she turned her head and glanced at me. She had the faintest, barely there smile on her lips. I held on to that smile for a long time. I thought it was a good start. Only later did I realize it wasn't a start at all. It was just going through the motions. I stood there for a very long time, until my phone buzzed again. I looked down. A WeChat message from Liu Ruyan. G. Boda. I have an emergency and had to leave. Probably won't make it today. Let's reschedule. Sent at 9:13 a.m. I stared at those lines of text, reading them word by word. Then, I read them again. Finally, I typed out a single word, okay, and hit send. After that, I shoved my phone back into my pocket, turned around and walked back. Meanwhile, Liu Ruyan was sitting in a taxi, gripping her phone so hard that her knuckles were white. The city streets blurred past the window, but she couldn't focus on any of it. Her mind was completely consumed by that phone call. Ruyan Cheng got into an accident. The caller was Yi Teng Cheng's secretary. Her voice was choked with sobs. He fell off the scaffolding. There's so much blood. We called an ambulance. And we're on our way to the hospital right now. He told me not to call his family. He told me to call you. Yi Teng Cheng. Liu Ruyan closed her eyes and took a deep breath. It had been a long time since she last heard that name. They broke up 3 years ago. Yi Teng Cheng moved out of town. While she stayed in the city, on the day they broke up, he said some awful thing. And she fired back with awful things of her own. In the end, Yi Teng Cheng said, Liu Ruyan, you're going to regret this. Liu Ruyan bit her lip and shot back. Regret? What? Regret being with you. Then she slammed the door and left. Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement. As she walked out of that building, her eyes stung. But she refused to let a single tear fall. After that, they never spoke again. She blocked him on everything. And he took the hint, never bothering her again. Occasionally, through mutual friends, she'd catch snippets of news about him. He went to work at a construction site. He made project manager. Sounded like he was doing pretty well for himself. She'd listen, nod, and say nothing. That news would stir up a brief ripple in her heart, and then, quickly, fade away. She really thought they would never cross paths again in this lifetime. Until today. Until she was standing outside the civil registry, waiting to get her marriage certificate with Jiboda. And her phone suddenly buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ruyan, I'm Yi Teng Cheng's secretary. Ting ting. Cheng got into an accident. He's in the ER. He keeps calling your name. Can you come? Central Hospital, Emergency Department. She stared at those words, her mind totally blank for a few seconds. Then, she dialed the number. The call connected, and Shu Tingting's voice came through, panicked and frantic. Ruyan, Cheng fell off the scaffolding. It's really bad. He's in a coma now. In the ambulance, he kept mumbling your name. I didn't know what else to do, so I texted you. She stood frozen, gripping her phone. Everything around her seemed to just fade away. The people waiting in line, the ones waiting for friends, the ones laughing, and the ones crying, they all blurred into background noise. All she could hear was her own heartbeat. Thump, 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 pounding so hard her temples ached. Then, she looked up, and frantically scanned the area. No sign of Jiboda. She looked down at the time. 9:03. Jiboda was 3 minutes late. Liu Ruyan knew she should be pissed. Jiboda was never an unpunctual guy. Whenever they made plans, he was never late. But today, he was late. On a day like this, of all days. But she didn't even have the time to be angry. She glanced at the text message one more time, bit her lip, walked to the curb, and hailed a taxi. The moment she got in the car, she sent Jiboda a WeChat message. I'm here. Where are you? After sending it, she clenched her phone, waiting for his reply. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. No reply. She stared at the screen. The screen went black. She tapped it awake, and it went black again. Tapped it awake again. The chat window only showed her message. Hanging there, all alone. Nothing but empty space beneath it. She remembered that when she was looking for him earlier, she thought she saw someone standing behind a tree in the distance, wearing a black shirt. The build looked a bit like his, but she hadn't gotten a good look. The taxi turned a corner, and the street view outside changed. Watching the buildings blur past the window, she suddenly thought of Jiboda's face. They met on a blind date. The matchmaker was one of her mother's friends. Their first meeting was at a coffee shop. When she arrived, he was already there, sitting by the window, an Americano in front of him, and a book in his hand. It was only when she got closer that she realized it wasn't a book. It was a work document. He was so focused on reading it that he didn't even notice her walking up. She stood in front of him and said, Jiboda. He looked up, stunned for a second, then quickly stood up, flustered as he scrambled to put the documents away. He said, I'm so sorry. I got a bit bored waiting, so I was just doing some light reading. She smiled and said, It's fine. They chatted for over an hour that day. He didn't talk much, but every word he said felt totally genuine. He said he worked at an architectural design firm. Said he didn't have many hobbies. Just reading. Playing ball occasionally. When he asked what she liked, she said she loved watching movies. Jiboda asked if there were any good movies out lately. She said there wasn't anything good out right now. Ji-Boda smiled and said, "Then, when a good one comes out, I'll treat you to it." She thought to herself at the time, this guy is actually pretty interesting. Later, they actually did go see a movie, an indie film. It was about a man and a woman missing each other and then reuniting. By the end of the movie, she was bawling her eyes out. Ji-Boda sat next to her, clumsily handing her tissues, completely out of his depth. He had no idea what to say. She asked him, "Why aren't you crying?" He said, "I'm not really good at crying." She burst out laughing. That was the first time she had ever laughed out loud in front of him. The taxi pulled to a stop, snapping her back to reality. "We're here," the driver said. Liu Ruyan paid and got out. Standing in front of Central Hospital, the ER sign was bright red with white letters. Impossible to miss ER. People were rushing in and out of the entrance. Some pushing wheelchairs, some carrying stretchers, some sprinting around with panicked faces. She clutched her document folder tightly, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The ER was packed to the brim. The smell of disinfectant was completely overpowering. She found the nurse's station and asked where Yi Teng-cheng was. The nurse checked the computer and said he was in the resuscitation room. She told her to wait outside. She walked over to the resuscitation room and saw Shu Tingting sitting on a bench, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Tingting. Shu Tingting looked up. Her eyes were completely red. She froze for a second when she saw her sec, then jumped up. "Sister Ruyan, you're here. How is he?" "They're still working on him. The doctor said he hit his head. It's not looking good." Shu Tingting looked like she was about to cry again as she spoke. She choked on her words. "It's all my fault. I should have kept an eye on him. He said he wanted to check out the site today. I told him I'd send someone else to do it, but he insisted on going himself." Liu Ruyan sat down next to her, resting her folder on her lap. The doors to the resuscitation room were closed. The red light above the door stayed on. Every now and then, a nurse would push through the doors, in and out. With every open and close of those doors, she could hear the chaotic noise inside, the constant beeping of monitors, the voices of doctors and nurses, and someone shouting. She sat there, staring at those doors, thinking absolutely nothing, but also feeling like she was overthinking everything. She remembered the last time Yi Teng-cheng called her. It was half a year after they broke up. That night, she was working late. She walked out of the office, super late, and realized it was raining. She didn't have an umbrella, so she stood at the entrance waiting for it to stop. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She picked it up. It was Yi Teng-cheng's voice on the other end. "Ruyan, are you doing okay?" Liu Ruyan gripped her phone, frozen for several seconds. Yi Teng-cheng said, "I just wanted to hear your voice." She replied to him, "Yi Teng-cheng, we're broken up." He said, "I know. I just... forget it. Never mind. Go home early. It's raining. Don't get wet." And then he hung up. She stood at the office entrance, staring at the dead dial tone on her screen. The rain was pouring down, splashing onto her feet, leaving a biting chill. She stood there for a long time, long enough for the rain to stop, long enough for her phone screen to dim and light up again, and dim again. She couldn't sleep that night, tossing and turning, completely awake. She thought about so many things from when they were together, the good and the bad, the happy and the miserable. She thought of the awful things he said on the day they broke up. She also thought of when they first got together, and that letter he wrote for her. The letter that said, "I'll treat you well for the rest of my life." Later on, she threw that letter away. And after that, she wiped him from her memory completely. Until today. The doors to the resuscitation room swung open. A doctor in scrubs walked out, pulled down his mask, and looking exhausted, asked, "Who is Yi Teng-cheng's family?" Liu Ruyan shot up to her feet, but then hesitated, and said, "I'm his friend." The doctor glanced at her and said, "He's been resuscitated, but there's an intracranial hemorrhage. He needs surgery immediately. The surgery is extremely high risk, and we need a family member to sign off." Shu Tingting was stomping her feet in a panic next to her. "His family is all out of town. It'll take them at least a few hours to get here." The doctor frowned. "Then who is going to sign?" Liu Ruyan stood there looking at the doctor, then glanced over at the half-open door of the resuscitation room. Inside, she could see a corner of the hospital bed. A single hand peeked out from under the white blanket. with an IV needle stuck into the back of it. Hooked up to a drip, she recognized that hand. Long fingers. Distinct knuckles. It used to hold hers. "Can I sign?" she heard herself ask. The doctor looked at her. "What's your relationship to him?" She stayed silent for 2 seconds. "Ex-girlfriend," she said. "I didn't go home. I walked back from the registry, passing by that breakfast stall. The stall owner was busy cleaning up bowls and chopsticks. When she saw me, she paused for a second. "Young man, you're back. Forget something," I said. "I'll take another bowl of soy milk." I sat down in the same spot as before, holding the bowl and drinking slowly. The soy milk was still hot, but this time, I didn't blow on it. I just took a sip straight away. It burned my tongue till it went numb, but I didn't spit it out. I just swallowed it. My phone was sitting on the table, screen facing up. After finishing the soy milk, I checked the time. 9:45 a.m. 45 minutes had already passed since then. I was supposed to have gotten my marriage certificate. I thought back to this exact day in my past life, between 9:00 and 10:00 a.m. What were we doing? Waiting in line. We queued up for 20 minutes. And then, filled out the forms. I filled mine out quickly. Liu Ruyan filled hers out even faster. After that, we sat on a bench waiting for our number to be called. Neither of us said a word. We just sat there. At the time, I wanted to find something to chat about, but I didn't know what to say. Ask her if she was nervous. I wasn't even nervous myself. Asking that would just seem fake. Ask her if she was hungry. It was barely past 9:00. Way too early to ask that. So, in the end, I didn't say a thing, and we just sat there. When they called our number, she stood up, and I followed. We walked up to the window together and handed in our paperwork. The staff verified our info and sent us to take our photo. While taking the photo, the photographer kept telling us to get closer, a little closer. So we did, shoulder to shoulder. Then came the vows, getting the certificate, and walking out of the registry. She checked her phone and said, "I'm going back to work." I asked, "Want me to drop you off?" She said, "No need. It's out of your way." And then she left. I stood at the entrance of the registry, watching her walk away. Her back was straight, her pace steady. She quickly disappeared into the crowd. I looked down at the little red booklet in my hands. I flipped it open. Both of our smiles in the photo looked incredibly forced. I put the booklet away and headed back to work, too. That evening, we grabbed dinner together at a restaurant near my office. A mini celebration, I guess. She ordered a bowl of noodles. I ordered a rice dish. We chatted while we ate, but the conversation was entirely about work. When we finished, I paid the bill. She said, "Let me get it." I said, "It's fine." She didn't insist. By the time we walked out of the restaurant, it was already dark. I walked her to the subway station. Standing at the turnstiles, she said, "Head back and get some sleep." I said, "You too." Then she swiped her card and went in, and I turned around and left. That was our first day as newlyweds. I finished the last gulp of my soy milk and put the bowl down. The stall owner came over to clear the table. She casually asked, "Young man, you got something going on today, huh? You look a bit off." I paused for a second, laughed, and said, "It's nothing." She cleared the bowl and walked away. I sat there, watching the people come and go on the street. At exactly 10:00 a.m. my phone buzzed. A message from Liu Ruyan. "I'm so sorry. I really can't make it today. Let's reschedule." Reschedule. I stared at the word, my mouth twitching into a wry smile. In my past life, we didn't reschedule. It was that exact day, at that exact time, right on the dot. If I really had shown up at 9:00 a.m. today, we would have walked in and gotten our certificate, and then lived out those 10 years. And then I'd get blackout drunk, and then I'd wake up. But this time, I didn't. I was an hour late, and in that 1 hour, I saw a completely different Liu Ruyan. A Liu Ruyan who panicked, who grew frantic, who would drop everything for someone, turn around and bolt. That Liu Ruyan. She had expressions on her face I had never seen before. Her brows tightly knit, her lips pressed together, her fingers trembling slightly as they gripped her phone. I knew her for 10 years, and I had never seen her like that. I always thought that was just who she was. Calm, detached, always put together. I had no idea she could panic, too. That she could become a complete mess. That a single phone call could make her drop everything and run. I didn't know who was on the other end of that call, but I knew for a fact that person definitely wasn't me. I stood up and started walking home. When I reached my building, I spotted a familiar silhouette, Liu Ruyan. She was standing at the entrance to my apartment building, staring down at her phone. She didn't notice me walking up. She was still wearing that beige trench coat, but her hair was a mess now. Her face was at sheer exhaustion of rushing around. What was she doing here? My footsteps faltered for a second, and then I kept walking. The sound of my footsteps startled her. She looked up, saw me, and froze. G. Boda. I asked, "Why are you here?" She stood there, still clutching that document folder. Her lips moved, but she didn't say anything. I walked right up to her, stopping 3 paces away. We stood, face to face, separated only by the March sunlight and the breeze. "Today, she started, her voice sounding a bit hoarse. Yi Tengcheng got into an accident." Yi Tengcheng. When I heard that name, something clicked in my brain. I had heard that name in my past life. Shortly after we got married, there was a time she took a call, and her expression looked off. I casually asked, "Who was that?" She said, "An old friend." Later on, I accidentally saw that name in her phone. The contact was saved as Yi Tengcheng, but their chat history was completely wiped clean. I never pressed her on it. I asked her what happened to him. She said, "He fell from some scaffolding. He's in the ER right now." She paused, then added, "That's why I went to the hospital earlier." I nodded. "Is he going to make it?" "They resuscitated him, but he needs surgery. He's still not out of the woods yet." She said, "His family hasn't arrived yet." So I stayed there for a while. I nodded again. We both fell silent again. The sunlight fell between us, illuminating the dust floating in the air. Someone in the apartment upstairs opened a window to air out their blankets. A rhythmic, repetitive thwacking sound. She asked, "Why didn't you go to the registry?" I looked at her and replied, "I did go." She froze for a second. "I didn't see you." My tone was flat, "But I saw you." I was standing behind that sycamore tree across the street. I stood there for a while, stared at me, her eyes full of complex emotions. "Then why didn't you come over?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about my past life, thought about those 10 years, thought about that thin, transparent wall between us, thought about the countless nights sleeping back to back, thought about her expression, as dead as a stagnant pool, thought about Tian Tian, asking Daddy, "Why were you so sad?" That exact moment, when I couldn't answer her, I said, "I wanted to see what you'd do if I never showed up." Liu Ruyan's gaze locked onto me. The wind blew, tossing her hair around. A few strands drifted across her face, but she didn't brush them away. She just kept looking at me. She said, "You saw it. So what?" I looked right back at her. Suddenly, I felt like some things just needed to be said out loud. "Ruyan," I called her name, my tone completely calm. "How long have we known each other?" She hesitated. 3 months. Right. 3 months. Met on a blind date. Saw each other 5 or 6 times. Had a meal together. Watched one movie. And then decided to get married. In my past life, I also thought this pacing was totally normal. After all, we're both at the age where we should be getting married. Conditions matched. Personalities matched. Our families were happy with it. So let's just do it, right? But now, I don't see it that way. 3 months, I said. "Do you really think you know me?" She didn't reply. I said, "And I don't know you, either. I remember you telling me you're a slow burn. That you're kind of cold. That you're not good at expressing yourself. But just now, and when I saw how panicked you were taking that call, I realized you actually had another side to you." Liu Ruyan's eyelashes fluttered. I continued, "I know why you're marrying me. We're getting older. Your family's rushing you. You think I'm a decent catch, and not too annoying. Same for me." She didn't deny it. "But earlier when I was standing there watching you, I said, I couldn't help but wonder, if something happened to me one day, would you run to me like that?" Liu Ruyan opened her mouth, trying to say something but stopped. "You don't have to answer." I said, "I don't even want to know the answer." The sunlight stretched a long shadow between us. The beating sound upstairs stopped. A window closed. And then everything went quiet. I asked, "Yi Tengcheng is your ex, right?" I paused, then asked, when you ran off just now, what was going through your head? Liu Ruyan stayed quiet for a long time. Then she said nothing. I raised an eyebrow. Nothing. She nodded. I just heard he was in an accident, and I wanted to go see. I didn't think about anything else, she said. I didn't think about whether I should go. I didn't think about whether you'd be waiting for me. I thought of absolutely nothing. I nodded. I understood that answer perfectly. And what are you thinking now? I asked. She looked up at me, a hint of confusion in her eyes. I don't know, she said. Liu Ruyan stood in front of me, and after saying, I don't know, we both fell silent. She actually could have explained a lot, like how she hadn't spoken to Yi Tengcheng in 3 years, like how they had a terrible falling out when they broke up, how the things he said were even worse than what she said, like how she only went there today, simply because she heard he was in an accident, and just wanted to make sure he was okay, nothing more. But she didn't explain, because she saw something strange in my eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a very calm, almost waiting look, like I was waiting for something to happen. She couldn't understand that look. Her phone rang at that moment. She looked down. It was Shu Tingting calling. Sister Ruyan. Shu Tingting's voice was frantic. Cheng is going into surgery. The doctor says it'll take at least 3 or 4 hours. Are you still coming? Liu Ruyan gripped her phone and looked at me. I said, if you want to go, go. She hesitated, then said into the phone, I'll be there in a bit. She hung up. She looked at me, wanting to ask something but not knowing how. You should go. I said, I don't have anything else going on, so I'm heading back. Call me if you need anything. With that, I turned and walked into the building. Liu Ruyan stood at the entrance, watching Jibota's back as he went upstairs. His pace was steady, every step planted firmly. When he reached the landing, he paused, but didn't look back, just kept going up. It was only when he completely disappeared up the stairs that she finally turned around and headed towards the hospital. When she arrived, Shu Tingting was still sitting outside the operating room. Seeing her approach, Shu Tingting stood up, her eyes red again. Sister Ruyan, Liu Ruyan asked, he's not out yet. No, Shu Tingting replied. The doctor said it's a very complicated surgery. It's going to take time. She sat down next to Shu Tingting, placing the document folder on her lap. Shu Tingting glanced at the folder, stared blankly for a moment and said, Sister Ruyan, did you have something important to do today? She looked down at the folder. Inside was her household register, her ID, photos, and all the documents she had painstakingly copied just yesterday. When she was getting everything ready, she had checked them item by item, double-checking to make sure she didn't miss anything, just like she would prepare for any major work project. Now, all those things were just sitting on her lap, completely useless. Liu Ruyan shook her head and said, it's nothing important. Shu Tingting didn't press her. The two of them just sat there on the bench, staring at the closed doors of the operating room. Time dragged on slowly. Every once in a while, a nurse would come out, and they'd look up eagerly. But the nurses always just hurried past. They weren't looking for them. Liu Ruyan looked down at her phone. The screen lit up, then went dark. Dark, then lit up. Jibota hadn't sent any messages. She opened her chat with him. The last message was still the one she sent. Let's reschedule. She typed a few words, then deleted them. Typed a few more, and deleted them again. In the end, she didn't send anything. Sometime past 3 p.m., the operating room doors finally opened. A doctor walked out, took off his mask, his face showing the relief of exhaustion. The surgery was a success. The patient is out of immediate danger. But we need to keep him under observation to see if there are any lingering complications when he wakes up. Liu Ruyan stood up, half the tension finally leaving her body. Thank you, doctor, she said. The doctor nodded and left. Beside her, Shu Tingting had her hands clasped together, muttering something, probably thanking every god out there. A while later, Yi Tengcheng was wheeled out. His head was wrapped in bandages, tubes sticking out everywhere, his face terrifyingly pale. Liu Ruyan stared at his face, feeling both foreign and familiar. She followed behind him all the way into the ICU. The nurses got him settled, went over some precautions, and then asked them to leave, saying the patient needed rest. They could wait outside. Liu Ruyan stood outside the ICU, looking at him through the glass. His brow was furrowed. Even unconscious, he was still frowning. She remembered what he used to say. He always scowled in his sleep. His mom said it was because he worried too much. He always denied it. Now, she was seeing that frown again. Sister Ruyan, Shu Tingting whispered beside her. Cheng, he never forgot you. Liu Ruyan stayed silent. Shu Tingting continued. He brought you up to me so many times. He said the biggest regret of his life was breaking up with you. He even still has old photos of you saved on his phone. I've seen them. Miss Shu, Liu Ruyan cut her off. Don't say any more. Shu Tingting clamped her mouth shut. Standing to the side, stealing glances at her, Liu Ruyan stood there, looking at the man through the glass. But her mind drifted to Ji Boda. She thought of him standing in front of her, saying, I don't even want to know the answer. That calm, steady gaze. She thought of him turning to walk up the stairs, how he paused at the landing, but never looked back. She suddenly felt so tired. It wasn't a physical tiredness. It was like something heavy sinking in her chest, falling endlessly, never hitting the bottom. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. It was a message from Ji Boda. How did things go on your end? She stared at the text, stunned for 2 seconds. Then she typed, surgery was a success. He's under observation in the ICU. After she sent it, she waited a long time for his reply. He only sent one word, okay. After I sent that, okay, I put my phone down. I lay on the sofa in my rented apartment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. My mind a tangled mess. Ever since I got back from the registry, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. What if I had shown up on time today? What would have happened? I knew the answer too well. We would have gotten married and lived those 10 years. She would have been a good wife. I would have been a good husband. We would have had an adorable daughter. We'd start paying off a mortgage, enroll our kid in early ed classes, deal with relatives during the holidays. We would maintain a perfectly respectable marriage in front of everyone else, and sleep back to back in the same bed for 10 years. We would grow old, grow tired, grow increasingly silent, until one day, one of us would finally crack and ask, what exactly are we doing? I didn't know if that person would have been me, or if it would have been her. But things were different now. Today, I didn't show up on time, and she didn't wait for me. She bolted to the hospital over a phone call. I stood behind a tree and watched it all unfold. We weren't married yet. That thin, transparent wall between us hadn't been fully built yet. I still had a choice. I could keep going. I could ask her to reschedule. I could just follow the original script. I could pretend those 10 years of memories never happened, and play the part of a clueless guy, living a life I could already see the end of. But I could also choose not to. I could tell her we weren't a good match, and we should just forget about it. Then she'd probably be stunned for a second, nod and say, okay. She'd go back to her life. She'd keep waiting for his call. What else? I don't know. All I know is, in my past life, she waited 10 years. And that call never came. Or maybe she did wait, but I just wasn't the one she was waiting for. I thought about that day at the hospital. She was standing outside the operating room, looking through the glass at the guy inside. I had never seen that expression on her before, but in that moment, it suddenly hit me. So she could look at someone like that. It's just that the person wasn't me. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up. It was from Liu Ruyan. Yi Teng Cheng is awake. I stared at that line of text, typed a few words, then deleted them all. Finally, I just sent. A little while later, she sent another text. His family is here. I'm heading out. I looked at the message, not knowing how to reply. I knew exactly where she was right now, stepping out of the hospital, standing by the side of the road, probably waving down a taxi. I knew she was wearing that beige trench coat, her hair a bit messy, looking exhausted. I knew she was still clutching that document folder, filled with all the paperwork we were supposed to use today. But I had no idea what she was thinking. I didn't know where she wanted to go now, going home, or coming to my place. I didn't ask. A moment later, she sent another text. Where are you? I stared at the text, hesitated for a few seconds, then typed back, at home. After hitting send, I sat up and looked at the door. I was waiting for her to come over, and waiting for an answer. Liu Ruyan stood at the hospital entrance, staring at the words on her screen. At home. She looked up at the street outside. The sky had already gotten dark. The streetlights weren't on yet, but the headlights of passing cars lit up one after another, merging into a flowing river of light. The wind blowing past was a bit chilly. She wrapped her trench coat tighter around herself. She should go home. Go home, take a shower, change into fresh clothes, and get a good night's sleep. Too much had happened today. She needed time to process it all. But she didn't head towards the subway station. She stood by the road, waved down a taxi, and gave the driver my apartment's address. The car started. The street view outside the window blurred past. She leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes. Her mind was a total mess. The moment Yi Tengcheng woke up, she happened to be standing right by the bed. He opened his eyes, his hazy gaze sweeping around the hospital room, before finally landing on her face. He looked at her for a few seconds. His lips moved, and he let out a hoarse voice. Ruyan, she nodded. His eyes suddenly turned red. At that moment, something deep inside her violently shuddered. Not because she was moved, but because in that split second, she suddenly remembered things from years ago. Back when they first got together. Once, when she was sick in the hospital, he took time off work to stay with her. For 3 whole days, he never left her side. She woke up in the middle of the night and saw him asleep, slumped over the bed, his brows furrowed, his mouth slightly open, like a little kid. Back then, she thought, he's the one for the rest of my life. But later on, they still broke up. His family disapproved. He was caught in the middle, torn between both sides. And in the end, he chose his family. The day they broke up, he stood in front of her, his head hung low in guilt, saying, Ruyan, I'm so sorry. She said, what's the use of being sorry? Then she slammed the door and walked away. After that, she never cried again. Until today, he was lying in that hospital bed, his eyes red, looking at her and asking, why are you here? She replied, your secretary called me. He nodded and closed his eyes. After a long while, he added one more thing. Thank you. Just 2 words, thanking her for rushing over today. She stood there, not knowing what to say. Later, a nurse came in and said family members could come in to visit. She stepped out and saw his parents running down the hallway, rushing in a panic. The expressions on their faces were something she couldn't read. She stood by the door, watching them go inside. She could hear his mom crying in there, and his dad whispering something next to her. Then, she turned around and left. When she got to the hospital entrance, she sent Ji Boda that message. Now, she was sitting in a taxi, heading his way. She didn't know what she was going there to do. Maybe she just wanted to see him. The taxi pulled over. She paid, got out, and walked into that rundown old apartment building. The stairwell was super dark. One of the motion sensor lights was busted, and the remaining one wasn't very bright either. She climbed up the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. When she reached the 3rd floor, she stopped and stared at the door. There was no unit number on it, just a faded lucky sticker, probably put up during the Lunar New Year, and never fully peeled off. She took a deep breath and raised her hand to knock. The door opened. I stood in the doorway, saw her, and didn't say a word. I just stepped aside to let her in. The room was very small, even smaller than what she used to rent. A sofa, a bed, a wardrobe, a desk. On the desk sat a bowl of instant noodles. The noodles were already soggy, with chopsticks resting on the side. She stood there, looking around. This was where I live. 3 years from now, when we got married, we would move into the down payment house her family bought, and I never came back here again. Have a seat, I said. She sat down on the sofa, sinking right in. The cushions completely caved under her. I stood by the window watching her. Neither of us said a word. After a long time, she said, Yi Tengcheng is awake. His family showed up, so I left. She paused, not knowing how to continue. Then she said, I don't know if what I did today was right. I looked at her and didn't reply. She said, I hadn't been in contact with him for 3 years. When I suddenly got that call today saying he was in an accident, I just didn't think about anything and ran over there. I nodded. She asked, are you mad? I'm not mad. I said. She was taken aback and asked, why aren't you mad? I looked into her eyes and said, because I didn't show up on time today either. She fell silent. I said, I was standing behind that tree, watching you wait for me for over 10 minutes. Watched you take that call, watched your face completely drop, and watched you run away. Right then, I couldn't help but think, the person you were waiting for was supposed to be me. But when you bolted, the person on your mind wasn't me at all. Her heart violently clenched. Ruyan. I called her name, my voice incredibly calm as I asked, did you ever love me? She opened her mouth, wanting to say, she did, but those words got stuck in her throat, and just wouldn't come out. You don't have to answer, I said. I thought about it all afternoon today, and I finally figured something out. She looked at me, waiting for me to continue. I said we really could get married. We look good on paper. Our personalities match. Our families are happy. We could have a kid and spend the rest of our lives together. There's nothing really wrong with that. Plenty of people live exactly like that. I paused, then continued, but, Ruyan, the way you look today, I've never seen that before. Not just because you were panicked, but because the person who made you panic like that wasn't me. As she listened to these words, her eyes slowly turned red. I said I don't know what real love is, but I'm pretty sure I know what settling looks like. Outside the window came the sound of a car honking, faint and distant, like it was coming from another world. I said, this single hour today showed me exactly what it would look like if we got married and 10 years, or 20 years down the line. It's not that it would be bad. It's just that when I stopped and thought about it, it just isn't enough. She kept her head down. A tear slipped out and fell onto her lap, leaving a small damp patch on her pants. She thought back to the hospital just a while ago, when Yi Tengcheng woke up and looked at her with those red eyes. She remembered a long time ago when he was hospitalized, and the night he fell asleep, slumped over her bed. She remembered the day they broke up, when she slammed the door, and walked down the street, crying for a very long time. Then she thought of me, remembered our very first blind date, how I was holding work documents while waiting for her, and got completely flustered when I stood up. Remembered how she bawled her eyes out during that movie, and how I awkwardly handed her tissues, totally out of my depth. Remembered me standing in front of her this morning, saying I don't even want to know the answer, with that incredibly calm look in my eyes. She realized she had never once panicked for me, never once received a phone call, and dropped absolutely everything to run to my side. I'm sorry, she said. I shook my head and replied, there's nothing to be sorry for. I walked over to the desk, picked up the bowl of soggy instant noodles, and dumped it into the trash. You should head back, I said. It's getting dark. She stood up and looked at me. She had so many things she wanted to say, but not a single word could make it out. I walked her to the door, with my hand resting on the doorknob. I paused for a second. Ruyan, I said, Yi Tengcheng is awake. If you still want to go see him, then go. Don't worry about whether you should or not. She looked up at me. I said, some things, once you miss them, they're really gone. I pulled the door open and stepped aside. She walked out, stopped in the hallway and looked back at me. I stood in the doorway. The light spilled out from behind me, casting a long shadow on the floor. Ji Boda, she said, my name. Yes. She didn't know what to say. Finally, she just said, take care. I nodded. She turned and walked down the stairs, her footsteps getting farther and further away, until I couldn't hear them at all. I stood in the doorway, staring into the empty hallway for a long time. Then I closed the door, went back inside, and sat down on the sofa. I looked up at the water stain on the ceiling. That crouching cat. In this tiny apartment I'd lived in for years, it suddenly felt incredibly quiet. My phone lit up. I picked it up. It was a message from her, about today. Thank you. I stared at it for a long time, then typed out a line. Don't mention it. I'll buy you a drink sometime to celebrate. Send. I set my phone aside and closed my eyes. The streetlights outside flickered on. The orange glow filtered in, casting a faint warmth across the floor. I thought about my past life, thought about those 10 years, thought about Tian Tian, thought about that last meal we had together, thought about the night I got blackout drunk, thought about the moment I opened my eyes and saw that water stain, and then I thought, this is for the best. Really, this is for the best. The June sun was already blazing hot. I stood outside my office, checking the address on my phone. One more time. 18 Xianjiang Road, Lily Hall. I put my phone away and headed in that direction. Today was Yi Tengcheng and Liu Ruyan's wedding. When I got the invitation, I froze for a few seconds. It was a bright red card, printed with two names, Yi Tengcheng, Liu Ruian, and a small line of text underneath. We cordially invite you to witness our happy moment. To me in this world, Liu Ruian. I stared at those words, and thought back to that night 3 months ago. She stood at my door, tears falling as she said she was sorry. I thought of the text I sent back. I'll buy you a drink sometime to celebrate. Didn't expect it to actually happen so soon. I put the invitation away, went to the mall, picked out a red envelope, and stuffed $600 in it. 6666 for good luck. Just for the symbolism. The wedding was scheduled for 11:18 a.m. at a Chinese restaurant on Xianjiang Road. By the time I arrived, it was already pretty packed. The couple's wedding photo was displayed at the entrance. In the photo, Yi Tengcheng was in a suit, and Liu Ruian was in a white gown. They were leaning into each other, smiling beautifully. Yi Tengcheng's smile was a bit goofy, and Liu Ruian's smile was a little shy. The sunlight fell on them, giving the photo a faint golden glow. I stood there and looked at that photo for a while. Then I walked in, handed my red envelope to the person collecting gifts at the door. They asked, "Excuse me, are you a friend of the bride or the groom?" "Bride," I said. They jotted something down in a ledger, and then handed me a small bag of wedding candy. "Right this way, please. Lily Hall is straight ahead and to the left." I took the candy and walked in. There were over a dozen tables set up in Lily Hall. A lot of people were already seated. I grabbed a random seat in the corner, put the candy on the table. The wedding hadn't started yet. The MC was on stage, tweaking the sound system. Soft music was playing. Some people were chatting. Some were scrolling on their phones. Kids were running up and down the aisles. The tables were neatly laid out with melon seeds, peanuts, and candy. Red tablecloths. Gold tableware. Very festive. I unwrapped a candy and popped it in my mouth. It was a soft milk candy. A little too sweet, almost cloying. At 11:18, the wedding started exactly on time. The MC got on stage and gave a short opening speech. Then he invited the groom up. Yi Tengcheng walked out from a side door, wearing a black suit, a bow tie, and a huge smile on his face. He was fully healed now. You couldn't even tell that 3 months ago, he almost died. The MC asked if he was nervous. He said, "Yeah, I'm nervous." The crowd started cheering, telling him to sing a song. He waved them off, saying he couldn't sing. Then, the music shifted. It was the wedding march. The main doors swung open. Liu Ruian, wearing a white gown, walked in slowly, her arm hooked through her father's seat. I sat in the corner, watching her walk down the aisle step by step. Her dress was a strapless style, with a very long train that trailed across the floor. Her hair was up in an elegant updo, topped with a small tiara. Her makeup was flawless, and she had a soft smile on her lips. She walked very steadily, every step perfectly in time with the music, not too fast, not too slow. When they reached Yi Tengcheng, her father placed her hand in his. He said a few words. Yi Tengcheng nodded, his eyes a little red. Then they stood face to face and began their vows. "Mr. Yi Tengcheng, do you take Ms. Liu Ruian to be your wedded wife, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health?" "I do, Miss Liu Ruian." "Do you take Mr. Yi Tengcheng to be your wedded husband, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health?" Liu Ruian looked at Yi Tengcheng, her eyes bright and shining. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was crystal clear. "I do." I sat in the corner, listening to those two words. I thought of that morning 3 months ago, standing outside the registry, watching Liu Ruian leave in a taxi. I thought of her sitting in that cab, clutching that document folder, and that look of panic on her face that I had never seen before. Right then, I knew exactly who I had lost to. I didn't lose to Yi Tengcheng. I lost to that phone call. I lost to the guy who made her drop everything and run. Exchanging rings, drinking the cross-cupped wine. Both sets of parents going on stage to give speeches, going through the motions, one by one. The MC announced that the banquet had officially begun. Waiters started bringing out plates of food. I grabbed some food with my chopsticks and ate slowly. The person next to me struck up a conversation. "Are you a friend of the bride?" "Yeah." "3 months," they nodded, and didn't ask anything else. Halfway through the meal, the bride and groom started making their rounds to toast the guests. They started at the head table and went table by table. When they got to my table, Liu Ruyan saw me and froze for a second. Yi Teng Cheng followed her gaze, and also paused. The three of us stood face to face. For a moment, no one said a word. Then Yi Teng Cheng held out his hand. Ji Boda. Ruyan brings you up all the time. I shook his hand and said, congratulations. Thanks. Yi Teng Cheng said, Ruyan told me about what happened that day. Thank you. I shook my head, but didn't say anything. Liu Ruyan stood next to him, looking at me. She wanted to say something but didn't know how to start. I told her, happy wedding. Her lips moved, but in the end, all she said was, thank you. I raised my glass to toast them. Yi Teng Cheng and Liu Ruyan raised their glasses too. The three of us drank together. It was baijiu, a bit harsh going down the throat. It left a burning heat in my stomach. After we drank, Yi Teng Cheng and Liu Ruyan moved on to the next table. I sat back down and went back to eating. Outside the window, the sunlight was streaming right in it, casting patches of gold onto the floor. By the time the wedding wrapped up, it was past 2 p.m. I followed the crowd toward the exit. When I got to the door, someone called out to me, Ji Boda. I turned around. It was Liu Ruyan. She had already changed out of her wedding dress. She was wearing a red cheongsam. Her hair was down now. Her face flushed slightly from the toasts. She stood in the doorway, holding something in her hand, looking at me. I walked over. She said, this is for you. She handed it to me. It was a red envelope, but not the one I had just given her. This envelope was way thinner. It definitely didn't have money inside. I took it and opened it. Inside was a photo of the newlyweds in their white dress and suit, standing at the altar. Both of them looked totally serious. One was saying, I do. The other was listening. It was taken from a side angle, but you could clearly tell the person listening was me. I looked up at her. She said, that day, at the registry, I asked the photographer to take one for us. I originally planned to give it to you after we got our certificate. But then, she didn't finish her sentence. I looked down at the photo for a long time. Keep it, she said, as a memento. I put the photo away, sliding it into my pocket. Okay? I said. The two of us stood at the door. The sunlight beat down on us, stretching our shadows out super long. I'm heading out, I said. I turned and walked out. After a few steps, I stopped and looked back at her, and stepped aside. She walked out, standing in the hallway and looking back at me. I stood in the doorway. The light spilled out from behind me, casting a long shadow on the floor. Ji Boda, she said my name. Yes, she didn't know what to say. Finally, she just said, take care. I nodded. She turned and walked down the stairs, her footsteps getting farther and further away, until I couldn't hear them at all. I stood in the doorway, staring into the empty hallway for a long time. Then, I closed the door, went back inside, and sat down on the sofa. I looked up at the water stain on the ceiling. That crouching cat. In this tiny apartment I'd lived in for years. It suddenly felt incredibly quiet. My phone lit up. I picked it up. It was a message from her about today. Thank you. I stared at it for a long time, then typed out a line. Don't mention it. I'll buy you a drink sometime to celebrate. Send. I set my phone aside and closed my eyes. The streetlights outside flickered on. The orange glow filtered in, casting a faint warmth across the floor. I thought about my past life, thought about those 10 years, thought about Tian Tian, thought about that last meal we had together, thought about the night I got blackout drunk, thought about the moment I opened my eyes and saw that water stain. And then I thought, this is for the best. Really, this is for the best. The June sun was already blazing hot. I stood outside my office, checking the address on my phone. One more time. 18, Xianjiang Road, Lily Hall. I put my phone away and headed in that direction. Today was Yi Teng Cheng and Liu Ruyan's wedding. When I got the invitation, I froze for a few seconds. It was a bright red card, printed with two names, Yi Teng Cheng, Liu Ruyan, and a small line of text underneath. We cordially invite you to witness our happy moment, to meet in this world, Liu Ruyan. I stared at those words and thought back to that night 3 months ago. She stood at my door, tears falling as she said she was sorry. I thought of the text I sent back. I'll buy you a drink sometime to celebrate. Didn't expect it to actually happen so soon. I put the invitation away, went to the mall, picked out a red envelope, and stuffed $600 in it. 66, double six for good luck. Just for the symbolism, the wedding was scheduled for 11:18 a.m. at a Chinese restaurant on Xianjiang Road. By the time I arrived, it was already pretty packed. The couple's wedding photo was displayed at the entrance. In the photo, Yi Tengcheng was in a suit, and Liu Ruyan was in a white gown. They were leaning into each other, smiling beautifully. Yi Tengcheng's smile was a bit goofy, and Liu Ruyan's smile was a little shy. The sunlight fell on them, giving the photo a faint, golden glow. I stood there and looked at that photo for a while. Then, I walked in, handed my red envelope to the person collecting gifts at the door. They asked, "Excuse me, are you a friend of the bride or the groom?" "Bride," I said. They jotted something down in a ledger, and then handed me a small bag of wedding candy. "Right this way, please. Lily Hall is straight ahead, and to the left." I took the candy and walked in. There were over a dozen tables set up in Lily Hall. A lot of people were already seated. I grabbed a random seat in the corner, put the candy on the table. The wedding hadn't started yet. The MC was on stage, tweaking the sound system. Soft music was playing. Some people were chatting. Some were scrolling on their phones. Kids were running up and down the aisles. The tables were neatly laid out with melon seeds, peanuts, and candy. Red tablecloths. Gold tableware. Very festive. I unwrapped a candy and popped it in my mouth. It was a soft milk candy. A little too sweet, almost cloying. At 11:18, the wedding started exactly on time. The MC got on stage and gave a short opening speech. Then, he invited the groom up. Yi Tengcheng walked out from a side door, wearing a black suit, a bow tie, and a huge smile on his face. He was fully healed now. You couldn't even tell that 3 months ago he almost died. The MC asked if he was nervous. He said, "Yeah, I'm nervous." The crowd started cheering, telling him to sing a song. He waved them off, saying he couldn't sing. Then the music shifted. It was the wedding march. The main doors swung open. Liu Ruyan, wearing a white gown, walked in slowly, her arm hooked through her father's. I sat in the corner, watching her walk down the aisle step by step. Her dress was a strapless style, with a very long train that trailed across the floor. Her hair was up in an elegant updo, topped with a small tiara. Her makeup was flawless, and she had a soft smile on her lips. She walked very steadily, every step perfectly in time with the music. Not too fast, not too slow. When they reached Yi Tengcheng, her father placed her hand in his. He said a few words. Yi Tengcheng nodded, his eyes a little red. Then they stood face to face and began their vows. "Mr. Yi Tengcheng, do you take Ms. Liu Ruyan to be your wedded wife, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health?" "I do." "Ms. Liu Ruyan, do you take Mr. Yi Tengcheng to be your wedded husband, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health?" Liu Ruyan looked at Yi Tengcheng, her eyes bright and shining. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was crystal clear. "I do." I sat in the corner, listening to those two words. I thought of that morning 3 months ago, standing outside the registry, watching Liu Ruyan leave in a taxi. I thought of her sitting in that cab, clutching that document folder, and that look of panic on her face that I had never seen before. Right then, I knew exactly who I had lost to. I didn't lose to Yi Tengcheng. I lost to that phone call. I lost to the guy who made her drop everything and run, exchanging rings, drinking the cross-cupped wine, both sets of parents going on stage to give speeches, going through the motions, one by one. The MC announced that the banquet had officially begun. Waiters started bringing out plates of food. I grabbed some food with my chopsticks and ate slowly. The person next to me struck up a conversation. "Are you a friend of the bride?" "Yeah." "How long have you known each other?" 3 months. They nodded and didn't ask anything else. Halfway through the meal, the bride and groom started making their rounds to toast the guests. They started at the head table and went table by table. When they got to my table, Liu Ruyan saw me and froze for a second. Yi Tengcheng followed her gaze, and also pause. The three of us stood face to face. For a moment, no one said a word. Then Yi Tengcheng held out his hand. Ji Boda. Ruyan brings you up all the time. I shook his hand and said, congratulations. Thanks. Yi Tengcheng said. Ruyan told me about what happened that day. Thank you. I shook my head, but didn't say anything. Liu Ruyan stood next to him, looking at me. She wanted to say something but didn't know how to start. I told her, happy wedding. Her lips moved, but in the end, all she said was, thank you. I raised my glass to toast them. Yi Tengcheng and Liu Ruyan raised their glasses too. The three of us drank together. It was baiju. A bit harsh, going down the throat. It left a burning heat in my stomach. After we drank, Yi Tengcheng and Liu Ruyan moved on to the next table. I sat back down and went back to eating. Outside the window, the sunlight was streaming right in it, casting patches of gold onto the floor. By the time the wedding wrapped up, it was past 2 p.m. I followed the crowd toward the exit. When I got to the door, someone called out to me, Ji Boda. I turned around. It was Liu Ruyan. She had already changed out of her wedding dress. She was wearing a red cheongsam. Her hair was down now. Her face flushed slightly from the toasts. She stood in the doorway, holding something in her hand, looking at me. I walked over. She said, this is for you. She handed it to me. It was a red envelope, but not the one I had just given her. This envelope was way thinner. It definitely didn't have money inside. I took it and opened it. Inside was a photo. A photo of the newlyweds in their white dress and suit, standing at the altar. Both of them looked totally serious. One was saying, I do. The other was listening. It was taken from a side angle, but you could clearly tell the person listening was me. I looked up at her. She said, that day at the registry, I asked the photographer to take one for us. I originally planned to give it to you after we got our certificate, but then, she didn't finish her sentence. I looked down at the photo for a long time. Keep it, she said, as a memento. I put the photo away, sliding it in my pocket. Okay, I said. The two of us stood at the door. The sunlight beat down on us, stretching our shadows out super long. I'm heading out, I said. I turned and walked out. After a few steps, I stopped and looked back at her. She thought about it and said, I want crawfish. Sure, crawfish, it is. Really? Yeah. My wife laughed from the passenger seat, her eyes curving into two little crescents. I glanced at her smile, and smiled too. The car merged into the traffic, and kept moving forward. Sunlight poured in through the window, casting a warm, dappled glow across my face. I thought, this is pretty great. Really, this is pretty great. It's March 15th again. I stood by the window, looking at the street outside. 10 years. It's been 10 years since that morning I woke up. The view outside the window has changed a lot. That old building was torn down ages ago, replaced by a new residential complex. The breakfast stall downstairs moved away. It's a convenience store now. Who knows where the pancake lady ended up? Occasionally when I pass by other places and see a pancake stand, I still think of her. 10 years is enough to change the face of a city, and more than enough to make me old. I looked down at my hands. Faint age spots had appeared on the back of them. Thick knuckles, loose skin. 10 years ago, these hands were still young and strong. I could easily scoop up my son, or pull an all-nighter, drafting blueprints. Not anymore. Holding my grandson for just a bit, or staying up one night, takes me 3 days to recover. Footsteps sounded behind me. My wife walked over, holding a teacup. Zoning out again, she handed me the teacup. What are you thinking about? I took the cup, and took a sip. Nothing, I said. Just thinking the weather is nice today. It is. She stood next to me, and we looked out the window together. Let's take our grandson to the park in a bit. Sure. We stood by the window, watching the sunshine outside. Our grandson was running around the living room, shouting, Grandpa, Grandpa. I looked back at him. The little guy was holding up a toy airplane, making it look like it was taking off. Coming. I responded with a smile, set my teacup down, and walked over. My wife watched my back, a smile playing on her lips. That night, I had a dream. In the dream, I went back 10 years. Standing at the entrance of the civil registry, watching that silhouette in the beige trench coat, she stood there, looking down at her phone, her brows slightly furrowed, like she was waiting for someone. I wanted to walk over to her, but my legs wouldn't move. I wanted to call her name, but I couldn't open my mouth. So I just stood there, watching her what. Then, she answered a call. Her expression changed. She turned and ran towards a taxi. The door opened. She got in. The car drove off, getting further and further away, until it vanished at the end of the street. I stood exactly where I was, staring in the direction the car disappeared. The sunlight fell on me. Warm. Someone behind me called my name. I turned around and saw my wife standing under the sycamore tree, holding our 1-month-old son. She smiled at me and said, "Time to go home." I nodded and walked toward her. After a few steps, I suddenly stopped and looked back one last time. The end of the street was completely empty. There was nothing there. I turned back around and kept walking forward. The sunlight stretched our shadows out long. 3 shadows overlapping each other. You couldn't tell who was who. I walked up to her, took my son, leaned down, and kissed the little guy's cheek. "Let's go home," I said. Together, we turned and walked toward home. Behind us was that familiar street. People coming and going. Cars driving past. Ahead of us was the old building we'd lived in for years. A few pots of pothos sat on the windowsill, glowing a brilliant green. In the sunlight, I held my son, walking forward step by step. And I never looked back again.